job you immediately quit right after putting in some hours, and why? Story 1. I got a job at a small restaurant after working at a chain restaurant for about 6 years and moving to a different city. The chain restaurant did a good job of teaching me the importance of food safety. In the first hour of my first and only shift, I watched the cook at the new restaurant chop vegetables on a cutting board right after cutting raw chicken on it. The cooks and servers were smoking in the kitchen, saw boxes of food being stored on the wet floor of the room that held all the chemicals and cleaning supplies, and saw the notice posted by the city health department saying the restaurant had 1 month to clean up their act or they'd be shut down. I worked that one shift and then noped the out, drove past the restaurant a few months later and saw they were shut down. Story 2. Repo Man. It was one of those fly-by-night rent-to-own joints. I was 22 years old. It was my job to drive the pickup truck to a client house, bullshit my way inside, then take away their prized rental item due to unpaid rental payments. I had a company shirt and a beaten-up hand truck and my wits. The first few days were stressful, trying to sidestep arguments and load up TV sets and recliners while the renters screamed and yelled at me. I somehow got through week 1. At the beginning of week 2, I was sent to repo a washer-dryer unit. The renter was a black mama with little kids running around. No man in sight. I bluffed my way into her house and started loading the washer onto the hand truck. She pleaded with me not to take it. She was crying openly. Her husband was in jail. She hadn't yet applied for welfare. All she had was food stamps and help from relatives. She had all these kids who needed clean clothes and diapers, and she really needed her washer-dryer. I thought about all this and the $2,200 markup those vultures charge for renting stuff like this, and I put the washer back. I told her she was officially not home all day and the house totally locked up. She held my hand and thanked me. I drove back to the rent-to-own, gave them the truck keys and company shirt, and quit on the spot. Those rent-to-own scumbags. I don't want to hear any libertarian, but they sign a contract bullshit. These people exploit the most desperate and poor and uneducated among us for profit. Them. Edit. Thanks for the gold. Stranger, my 22-year-old self would have been very happy about it because I was pretty angry at the world at that moment. I worked at a call center for all of 3 days. That was literally the longest that I could last, and I was up with guilt-ridden nightmares for both of the nights in between. The thing is, I wasn't working a sales gig, at least not in the traditional sense. I was a talent scout for an incredibly shady organization that sought to trick parents into purchasing acting and modeling lessons for their kids. There was more to the pitch in the process, of course, but that was the general thrust of things. I'd call people up, enthusiastically recite a script, and then book them into one of our last remaining slots. The kids and their parents would arrive on Saturday or Sunday, go through a fake audition complete with fake casting agents, and then be instructed to call a given number on Monday morning. That number, of course, would connect people right back to the call center. They'd be told that the casting agent had loved their child's audition, but that the kid needed to get some additional training. The parents would then be suckered into paying thousands of dollars for 6 weekends worth of completely worthless classes, with the caveat that their offspring would be summarily expelled if they missed even one session, unless, that is, they paid even more money to have their kids stay in the bogus class. TLDR, I could only handle 3 days as a call center con artist. Story 3. Fish and Chip Shop. I went in for a trial shift, then realized he was trying to play me for the advert said that I would basically just be on the till, taking orders, processing money, and all that. Then when I got there, he said that it was actually running the whole place, cooking all the food and no chef. Microwave noodles are my specialty, ordering stocks, all that managerial stuff, for way less than minimum wage. He then went on to say that if I did well, after a few months he would give me a raise to a pay that was still way under minimum wage. Guy must have been crazy. Story 4. Petland. I had worked at one before as a head kennel tech, so I knew the animals were taken care of as I was doing the caring. I moved cities and applied a new location. I was hired on the spot and told to start right away. Now, to give you some idea of how my previous Petland experience went, we had very strict rules. Every morning at 6 a.m., all animal cages were fully cleaned. Fresh shavings fluff for the hamsters, bunnies, mice, etc. Full wipe downs of the puppy and kitten kennels. There was also a mandatory check every 15 minutes. All the puppies and kittens were weighed every other day to ensure proper growth. Every dog was walked twice a day, and the kittens would get 2 30-minute play times a day. Yes, I got paid to play with kittens. Kennels were also on rotation to go in the playpen for 30 minutes to be played with by customers and get a chance to run around. It was very clean, and I truly felt the animals were healthy and happy besides being in cages, which is always sad. Now back to this new Petland. The manager took me on a walkthrough of the kennels and showed me the ropes. She started out by saying that due to financial reasons, they couldn't hire a kennel tech to strictly take care of the kennels. They would also be expected to work in reptiles, fish, as well as face shelves and work on the floor selling. There were no health charts for the animals, no birth dates, no weights, nothing. We were not allowed to do 15-minute checks because it was a waste of time, so kennels were only depooped once a day. There was a playpen, but we were only allowed to put puppies in them if the store was really busy. Otherwise, it would be a waste of time. There were no walks. There was no playtime. She said that she would walk them maybe every few days if she had the time, and that they entertained themselves. The puppies had no blankets or toys, just metal-grated floors. Every single kennel had smeared all over. Half the puppies had diarrhea. The entire back room smelled of giardia. The kittens had empty water bottles and smelled like stale wet cat food. The kennels were only cleaned once a week on Friday, and the dogs would be put in insanely small, rusty metal cages overnight while the kennels dried. The entire store smelled like ferret musk, as since she didn't mention when they cleaned the small animal cages, it must have not been a priority. Kennel techs were pretty much only allowed to be back in the kennels to feed. The entire time she explained things to me, she acted as if all of it was totally fine and normal. The conditions were filthy. The animals' emotional well-being wasn't even given a second thought, and these animals just looked utterly depressed. Needless to say, halfway through the walkthrough, after she had explained the kennels to me, and me almost being in tears, I didn't say a word and walked right out. I reported them the second I got in my car. The good news is they no longer have a license to sell animals. How it went on for so long is beyond me. All it took was a phone call. You would think that the people who apply at these places have some love of animals, but there is no way a sane, caring person could watch these things happen and act as if nothing is wrong. Edit spelling edit for those asking. I reported them to the SPCA Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. They are big in Canada. I believe the Humane Society is the main one in the United States. They're the people to call in situations like this. Story 5: Kirby Vacuum Cleaner Sales. I answered an ad for carpet cleaners will train, guaranteed $2,500 month salary. I knew I'd made a huge mistake during orientation and training, but I stuck it out for a few days, thinking the money would be worth it. My first sales call was to a house in a very low-income neighborhood that had responded to a call offering a free carpet cleaning of one room. They'd had a dog living in a room, and the dog had all over the carpet. During the demo, the husband and wife kept leaving the room to have a fight about who was cheating on whom, and the senior seller, I was learning from, kept going in, interrupting them and showing them how well the vacuum was cleaning the room. Somehow he managed to get these people to buy a hideously expensive vacuum on credit that they couldn't possibly afford. That was the end of it for me. Selling overpriced to people who definitely couldn't afford it. Using bait and switch techniques was far too shady for me. Story 6: McDonald's. I had just started working, and the manager told me to learn about frying filet-o-fish, McSpicy, and McChicken from this lady who worked the fryers. Problem was, the lady was a nut job. When you put the patties in the fryer, you're supposed to start a timer, so you know when to take them out. She forgot to do so. I realized after a few minutes and reminded her. But by then, the manager had walked in and seen the mistake. Lady Nutjob get pissed when the manager blames her, starts screaming incoherently, grabs the patty receptacle from the pool of hot frying oil, and chucks it in the middle of the work area. I didn't return for work after that. I did order food at that branch again. A few years later, Lady Nutjob hadn't been fired yet. Story 7: Roofing. I was looking for work and took the first construction job I could find. It was November, and we had an early snow. Got to the job site, the roof was 40 feet up, new construction. The only other guy on the team walked out on the roof, which was an easy 45 to 60 degrees slope. No safety equipment at all. I asked about it, and he said he just ties a rope to his waist to make it look good when the inspector comes by. I said, nope, my life is worth more than 10 an hour. 2 months later, he fell. Not as high as that day, but nonetheless he fell and broke his leg. Story 8: Local coffee sandwich shop run by an idiot who had no business sense. I frequented the establishment and knew most of the folks who worked there and needed extra income to supplement my minimum wage part-time job, and applied to the coffee shop while they performed some renovations. Prior to my first day, I told him I couldn't work past a certain time because I had to go to my other job. First and only day on the job, I came in. Owner threw me in front of the espresso machine. I knew how to work one, but not his. Gave me no direction on how their drinks were made, and went back to the office. Around lunchtime, swarms of people came in, and he threw me in front of the cash register. Another one of those figure-it-out-yourself moments. Well, more than a moment since it was all afternoon. At one point, he came over to me and asked me to please slow down on taking orders because the kitchen staff couldn't keep up. He disappears again for the remainder of the afternoon, and the time has swiftly approached and surpassed the time I said I had to leave by to make it to my next job and get some food in me. When he finally reappeared, I told him I needed to go, to which he responded, "Oh, I thought you could stay until such and such time, dude, no?" He paid me cash, and I went in the next day to tell him I couldn't work there anymore. Story 9, about 7 years ago, I got a job at Walmart as a cashier. After a short time of doing it, I reached up, turned off the little light of my cash register, walked away, and as I passed my assistant manager, I said I'm going on break early. I'm not coming back. There was no way I was doing that job for another moment. The people were making me insane. I was having nightmares about dealing with them. The whole time I was there, I was just fighting back the urge to not snap. People were so rude. I mean, it just seemed like every other customer had something to about. Not my scene, man. Quit and signed up for EMT class like a week later. Story 10, telemarketer for a window company. How am I supposed to sell windows over the phone? Hello, sir. I have an interesting product for you. Customer, go on me. You know the hole in your house, the apartment business, building the one you don't walk through. Customer, you mean my windows, me it. You've already got one. Have a good day, sir. Story 11, delivering pizza at a brand new Domino's in the ghetto. Why did I quit after 2 days? Delivered pizza to the project's way after dark and had people pay me in $100 bills. General manager disappeared before the store had even launched. Apparently, he had gambling debts. When I met him, he was super nervous and sweating a FCK ton. Assistant manager robbed me on my second night. And since everyone is asking, after my shift was done, my assistant manager counted me out. He took the cash in the back to count it while I did dishes. This was a red flag to me, but whatever, he comes out and give me 5 as my take home. I knew I had earned like 80 or so. Anyone who has done a lot of deliveries knows you don't up your own count that bad. It was such a blatant ripoff, I just sat there dumbfounded. Can't remember what happened next. Either I said he did the count wrong, or he just read it in my face, and he got super defensive all of a sudden and started yelling at me about getting back to the dishes. Anyways, I knew I was screwed. Nothing I could do. I mean, FFS, the manager, was completely MIA. So I finished the dishes and just left, came back for my check a few weeks later. Then I went to work for Gumby's Pizza, which involved a lot of drugs and a fair amount of physical violence. But that's a story for another day. Story 12, after a discouraging semester at college. I hired back into the blue-collar line of work ID previously left. Doing that mind-numbing work reminded me how much I disliked it. I quit after the second day and completed college. Story 13, I had a student job in the back office of a baby supply store. Shortly after I began, the boss hired 2 interns who worked for free and were supposed to do the exact same work I did. Since there was only one computer and they worked 35 weeks, there was never a time I could actually come in. Of course, I was paid for the actual time I spent there. This was technically them firing me, but I just quit. Story 14, hired into a new business for immediate cleaning up of accounts payable. The only thing that they were current on was cutting paychecks, and most of those didn't have the correct deductions. Phoenix, Arizona, in the middle of the summer. They needed me bad. They needed to hire me about 4 assistants before there were going to be enormous fines for failure to transmit income taxes and FICA withheld to the IRS. Small building with a flat roof that had black tar for a sealant. One small evaporating cooler for the whole building, without any circulation. After about an hour, the power went out. The temperature zoomed to well over 120 F. I talked to the manager. I offered to take work to my apartment and work on it in air-conditioned comfort until he could get the building cooled down. He refused and told me that I was being paid well enough to put up with a little discomfort. I went outside to calm down. It felt cool, and the temperature outside was over 110 F. I walked over to an employee that was in the shade and asked him to tell anyone that asked about me that I quit, got in my car, and left. Story 15, I worked at Starbucks for 3 weeks. I have a most feminazi boss on the planet. She hated any male that worked there and purposefully gave us tasks without a manageable time limit so that she could report us. My second day, she had me stock the shelves in the back of the supermarket. It was a Starbucks and a Kroger's. She did not show me where things were or where they went, so I spent about an hour asking people and looking. Once I finished the job, I came back, and she had reported me to management. They called me up, told me she was crazy, and sent me back to work. The final straw came when I was supposed to give her my availability. I gave it to her, and then the next day came in to see that she had scheduled me only for the hours I said I couldn't work. Not a single other hour, just my times I couldn't. I walked over to her, told her to have fun working Thanksgiving, and I left. She yelled that I had to put in 2 weeks, or she was never going to recommend me to another job, to which I laughed in her face that she thought I would ever even tell anyone I worked there. That woman was horrible. TLDR, Starbucks feminazi boss was horrible. Made it 3 weeks. Story 16, I worked at a Borders Books while they were just setting up a new store. I have a lifelong passion for books and reading, and the thought of working for a place filled with books, even a really corporate one, seemed pretty amazing. When they hired me, I imagined working there for a long time and using my employee discount to develop a great personal library. Then they started making everyone do cheers and sing company-related songs. Though I stood in the circle with the others, I wouldn't join in the chanting or clapping. My manager reprimanded me in front of the group. I said I didn't like doing cheers about unpacking books. I just wanted to work at the bookstore. They said I had to learn to like it. It was like joining a cult. I continued to refuse to join in the chanting and was reprimanded again. At the end of the day, I quit. I truly hate the demise of brick-and-mortar bookstores, but I felt a surge of glee when that place closed down. You and your little songs, Borders. I worked at a beverage beer distribution center for one 11-hour day. It was a job stacking cases of beer on pallets, wrapping them up, and placing them where they could be picked up and loaded on trucks. I was scheduled for 8 hours of training, but it was second shift, so as soon as the boss left for the day, about 45 minutes into the shift, all the valued employees who were supposed to be training me started vanishing every hour on the hour to get high in their cars out back. I'm not an anti-weed guy by any means, but how about waiting until you're done training the new guy? So, when these guys were in the warehouse, my day consisted of stone dummies pointing at cases of beer and making me do literally all of their work. I probably did 3 guys' jobs that night. As quitting time neared, they started giving me about not going fast enough and how we were going to have to stay late because of me. I strongly considered pointing out that they had both hands and arms and could probably give helping out a shot, but decided to say it and just get it done. 3 hours after we were supposed to leave, I'm covered in dirt, grime, gross, skunky dried beer, goo. A lot of stuff shows up broken in the warehouse, and even more gets broken while there. And I've got multiple hand cuts and a piece of a broken bottle in my thumb. When I got outside, a huge thunderstorm was coming, and I found I had locked my keys in my car on lunch after smashing out a small rear window in my poor, beloved Nissan Stanza. I drove home and never looked back. When I woke up the next day, I could barely move my arms after moving hundreds of beer cases the previous night. Called the manager, and while biting my tongue, trying not to sell out the terrible employees I had met the previous night, told him the job just wasn't for me and apologized profusely. It was literally the first time I outright quit a job. The worst was calling my friend who worked there and had arranged for me to get the job. I felt terrible quitting after a day when he had recommended me. His response was, "Oh, I should have warned you. The second shift guys are no worries. I still flip off their delivery trucks when I see them around the area almost weekly, and it's been almost 10 years since that fateful day." TLDR, working with beer wasn't as fun as I was led to believe. Story 17, cruise ship waitress. There were 5 other waitresses, and they were all bullies. They set me up for failure, gave me the wrong jobs, and blamed everything on me. I put up with their pranks and rude remarks until they tried to take pictures of me in the shower. There were a lot of things that built up to me walking off that ship 4 days after boarding, but that was the straw that broke the camel's back. Also, no Wi-Fi. Story 18, perhaps this is completely common, but in my high school, the only reason to be in the yearly musical was because this one kid always had a raging house party after the first show, and you had to be involved in the musical to go. The stories of it were legend. Drinking and girls making out with each other, and, well, I guess just that. But is that not the stuff of legend? Most of my friends didn't have it in us to try out for even a tiny part, but some friends had success being on the crew. You did lights or props or built sets or whatever, showed up on weekends and did behind-the-scenes stuff, and then got hammered as sweet as high school party. So I would build props for the musical. Surely I could slink around in the background long enough to punch my ticket to a real party. I went once. Turns out drama kids are insane. The entire thing was just pure, unhinged chaos. I don't know what I expected. Story 19, door-to-door sales. I didn't own a car, so I had to leave house by 5:45 a.m. to catch a string of buses that ran once per hour. Workday went from 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. in a job I hated. Would get home by 1 a.m. Story 20, I went for an interview with a company that looked very professional online and claimed to be an advertising and marketing firm with ties to some very powerful companies. The interview in a dilapidated and almost war-torn building that they were passing off as an office in the center of Manchester lasted about 5 minutes. I was immediately offered the job and told to go with one of the senior sales executives to see how they do things. At this point, I still had no idea what the job was, what they sold or marketed, couldn't even work out what the name of the company was after hearing about 5 different names thrown about. Went out on a train ride with this guy, and when we got to the street he was working, he opened up his backpack and rooted through about 15 different colored vests for charities, etc. Eventually settling on the RSPCA, we went to the first door, and he basically just conned an old woman out of 5 and then moved on to the next door. I moved on to the train station and just pretended I hadn't spent my morning involved in such a thing. TLDR, went for an interview hoping to become Don Draper. Ended up going door to door conning old people out of money meant for charity. Story 21, a national furniture chain. The person training me was laughing and bragging about all the sweatshop labor they use. That was the first day. I never went back. Story 22, I took a job at a doggy daycare, thinking it would be about a 5,050 split between playing with dogs and cleaning. I knew there would be a lot of cleaning, but it was like 95 cleaning, bleach, soap, squeegee, mop, ugh. I wanted to be around dogs so badly because I couldn't have one in my condo, and I was looking forward to getting out of retail. They also scheduled us, so we worked 6 hours, 45 minutes so that they wouldn't legally have to give us a break, since it's a 7-hour shift that requires a break. By the middle of my first shift, I was jealous of the dog's water bowl. They wouldn't let me even go to the bathroom because the dogs could not be unsupervised. I felt imprisoned, and it was just terrible. Then I found out there was no heat or AC in the kennel area. It was pretty okay when I was there, but I could see the potential for temperature extremes, and I knew I didn't want to be around for any of that. On top of that, they had way too many dogs for one person to handle, and I got thrown in with the ginormous dogs my first day and learned I have a bit of a fear of large numbers of large dogs. And I realized if any of the dogs got into a fight, I'd be far too weak to break them up, and I would be a liability because I have a bad back that is always this close to being thrown out. Lastly, they were always letting the dogs into the play area when the floors were still wet, so dogs would come sliding in, and I thought for sure some of the elderly dogs would end up with joint problems or soreness. There were plenty of dogs who just sort of tiptoed around, like they knew that one wrong move would really hurt. It was like ice because it was a smooth, wet cement floor. I only lasted 2 days, then they refused to pay me for the 75 hours I worked. Story 23 worked in a factory making those little sour cream packets, and was never trained by the manager on how to do anything. He just took me to the machines that had a feed of sour cream, a big roll of wax paper that heat sealed the sour cream inside, and a giant stack of cardboard to make boxes from so the finished packets could drop into. He then pointed at the guy that was also working at the machines and said, "He will help you get running on these." I thought, okay, sounds good. Turns out the guy I was working with couldn't speak or hear. All he could do was kind of bark at me, BH, 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 while gesturing wildly around the area. I finished out the day and never came back. Story 24, I worked at Blockbuster for 2 days straight out of high school, and it was awful. The combination of playing the same 2-hour repeating promo video for 2 whole weeks was awful, as well as most of the customers who got angry at you because you were not allowed to hold brand new releases for a few hours until they show up. Also, Blockbuster had no late fees at one point. You had a 10-day grace period to return your movie before it charged your account, and people still couldn't get it done. Frustrating, and I vowed never to work retail again. Story 25, just graduated and applied to a marketing job. I show up for the interview, and there are about 10 other people there for interviews as well. Turned out to be a door-to-door sales company that was selling ATTU-verse subscriptions. Apparently, they needed to interview 50 people a day because 99 of us realized it was bullshit. Story 26, Abercrombie kids. I was young and naive, too young to work at Abercrombie & Fitch, and thought I was really cool because I got recruited by one of the trendiest retailers in the mall in 2006. I worked there for a total of 4 days, 16 hours total. Among the reasons I quit, I had a lot of Abercrombie clothes already, but none of them fit the employee dress code. So I had to spend another $150 on a new outfit just to go to work. This is more than I made during the total hours I ended up working there. Obviously, the horrible CD that consisted of about 6 songs and played on repeat during my entire shift, yes. LFO's Girls of Summer was on there, and I swear it played more than the other songs. We had a very specific system of how to spray the mannequins with cologne. Something like once on the head, 1 on each shoulder, 3 on the torso. I don't remember exactly, but it was asinine. The horrible bitch moms that came into the store walked right past me, a model greeter, proceeded to throw shirts I had just folded all over the ground, and then walk out when they couldn't find the right size, which generally was among the shirts piled on the floor. The final straw. It was a slow day, and I just finished perfectly folding every single polo shirt in my section. This is like 100 shirts we're talking about, all folded in a very specific way for maximum collar poppage. I had just moved to the front door to see if anyone was headed into the store so that I could greet them because that was my job, and my boss came over. She asked what I was doing. I told her, and she walked over to my immaculate display of moose-covered polo shirts, swiped them off the table, and told me, when there's no work to do, you need to make your own. Yes, she told me that after I had finished folding, if there was nothing else to do in my section, it wasn't like I could leave my section and help someone else. That was against the rules. Then I should promptly unfold everything and start refolding. I walked out about 10 minutes after that. For about 9 months, they kept calling me to schedule more shifts, and I never answered my phone. TLDR, I never got fired, and I never formally quit. So for all I know, I still technically am employed by Abercrombie today. Story 27, I worked at a beachfront restaurant that is very popular in our area. We're talking directly on the beach, with no AC, 2 to 3 hour wait every night was standard, sometimes more. I was a busser. It was my 3rd month there, and I'd been crushing it would regularly pull doubles roughly 9 a.m. to 2 a.m. and walk out with $1,000 in cash. Easiest money I've ever made, albeit smelliest. On any given night, there was 3 bussers downstairs, 2 upstairs, a roamer to fill in, and a sorter. There were 2 dining sections upstairs on opposite ends of the building and weren't connected. This meant to go from one to the other, you had to go downstairs, across the super-packed restaurant, and upstairs again. I was 18 at the time and never made so much money, and was buying lots of drugs to show for it. So the long, sweaty hours of hard work didn't bother me. We were all used to at least one person calling out every night. Even though it was my first year, I worked harder than every other busser there. This is not a brag. It is a fact evidenced by the fact that every server bartender paid me well over the required tip out and regularly told me so. The head busser made the schedule. This guy was an asshat. Been working there for 3 years, but only during summer break at college. He got pissed my first week because of my praise and started giving me 3 to 4 sorting shifts every week. Sorting shifts are the devil. You literally stand at the dish pit and get every bus tub in the restaurant dropped in front of you. Then you sort everything for the dishwashers to wash and dump the tubs. When a trash can of your 8 gets full, you drag it to the big dumpster out back and scrap through it with a garden trowel to check for silverware for 5 to 9 hours straight. Every busser is supposed to do an equal amount of these shifts, but I always got twice as many as everyone else. Fun fact, every busser tipped the sorter as measly 5 at the end of sorting shift. So where they would make $400 to $600 off a single shift each, sorter gets like 30, while head busser, or as I called him, Kyle liked to do, he called out one night, as did his 3 friends scheduled. This left just me and Josh, the sorter for the night, as we had already lost 2 people. Josh sees all the call out, turns around, and goes home. This leaves me for this entire Thursday night shift. I was stoked. That part is not sarcasm. I went around and told all the servers I would still cover the ice wells ice bins were outside under the restaurant, down a flight of stairs, because I didn't want the servers to leave the tables and get sweaty gross. They would have to cover cup silverware. No problem, they said. They felt bad for me. I didn't give a. I knew I was about to make enough money that night to buy a car if I wanted. Rush hits. I'm busting my through that restaurant. Sweat is pouring off my face as I run around, still pre-bussing tables to boot. I even had a customer slip a 50 bill in my pocket saying I was working so hard. I felt like a god after about 5 to 2 hours, though. I can't keep up with sorting 2. The 3 dishwashers refuse to do the sorting for one night. I tell both managers on duty that I absolutely cannot sort and bust the entire place. They tell me as they are leaning against the bar watching sports that I am going to have to. No one else is available. Mind you, they're watching TV, and the dishwashers are lean back talking because they have no dishes to wash because I'm too slow. Our restaurant is actually running out of dishes. The cooks are going wild in the kitchen. Food is burning because there is no plates to put it on. The servers pulling expo are running around crazy thinking about serving into-go boxes. Dishwashers laughing. Managers hear the commotion and walk to the back to see what's going on, realize the disaster, and split off on the floor searching for me. As I am coming down the stairs dripping sweat, carrying 4 bus tubs stacked total of 86 plates, FYI, a record for the store, and trying to stop my arms from spasming and failing me, the manager stops in front of me. He urges me to the dish pit and clears a path, clearly concerned that something has gone wrong. We get back there, and I set my tubs down, and he starts screaming, "Get these tubs sorted. We have clean dishes, and you will not be the cause of U.S. shutting down." Customers can hear this. Employees hear this. Expo line and kitchen dead stop. Everyone knew it was and thought I was going to snap. Had a bit of a temper back then. I just started laughing. After about 15 seconds of the manager staring like I'm crazy, I stopped. I just told him to go himself and walked out. I got over 20 calls in the next 10 minutes from every manager, including the ones off duty. Never answered my phone, never looked back. God, do I miss the money, though. I work in a laundry room at a hotel for 6 hours. I've been out of work for a while, and my husband works full-time, making all right money. So I was looking for a part-time job just to have something to do during the week and make a little spending cash. I figured washing sheets for 20 hours a week couldn't be that bad, right? Well, the laundry room has 2 large industrial-sized washers in it, and both just happened to be broken on my first day of work. They were still starting and washing, but not spinning anything out, leaving me with about 80 pounds of towels to take out to the parking lot and try to twist the water out by hand. My hands ended up blistered and burnt from the bleach water. I make it through my first shift and never went back.